James from Euclid, Ohio, and you are listening to Barbecue Central.
Let's go!
We'll do it live. Okay. Well, do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
So to get that perfect barbecue, you use wood. Are you sure it's safe? Whatever. We put the lighter fluid on, strike the match, and... Oh! Should we call the fire department? That might be a good idea.
All right, good evening, and welcome to the really big Barbecue Central show. This is the show that talks about all things important in the world of barbecue and grilling. The show originating from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame city, Bomb City, USA, Cleveland, Ohio, the barbecue capital of the North Coast. I am your program host, Greg Rempe. Happy to have you aboard here on your Tuesday evening's live fire fun and frivolity show. If you want to get in contact with the show tonight or you want to follow the show during off-show hours, here's how you do all of that.
You can get in touch with the show by sending an email to Greg at bbqcentralshow.com. Follow us on all the social media channels at BBQ Central Show. And be sure to subscribe to the show podcast feed on your favorite podcast platform.
Anything else you want to find out about the show can be found at the main website, thebbqcentralshow.com. And here's what's happening in case you get the newsletter coming up in about 12 minutes from now. The second Tuesday of the month, and that brings a visit from our pal, the creator of AmazingRibs.com, Meathead. One major topic of the evening, and then one subtopic of the evening. The major topic being the aging of beef. There's a couple different ways to do it. Maybe there's more than a couple ways, but the ways that most people know about are wet aging. So we'll talk about wet aging, what that entails, what that lends to the protein, if anything at all. And then we'll talk about my favorite, dry aging, taking a nice piece of beef out to, let's say, 100-plus days, getting the funk factor going on that piece of beef. You might not be as funky as me, but are you funky enough, as the DOC used to say back in the day? So wherever your level of funkitude is on meat, Meathead and I will talk about dry aging side of things, what the process of that is like, what that does to the meat. So for all of you intermediate to expert level fans of the show, or medium to expert level live fire cookers who you know everything, this might be a portion of the show that is a bit of a refresher for you, but we always have a new incoming audience that is basic at best. Maybe they've heard about these terms and they don't know anything about them, so we'll start to teach them what the goodness of the Barbecue Central show is and the goodness of wet and dry aging and how they differ and what they do to beef. So that's Meathead. And then, in the 35 past the first hour, our pal Robert Moss, the contributing barbecue editor of Southern Living Magazine, will join us. We have couple different topics that we'll be talking about with him, not the least of which is getting his reaction to Daniel Vaughn and his last visit saying, hey, Southern Living, get the hell out of Texas. You leave reviewing Texas barbecue restaurants to Texas Monthly. Take your bags and beat it. Hit the bricks, pal, and beat it, because you are going out. You take care of the rest of the South. And I do know where the South is. And I do know where Maryland is in relation to where Ohio is. It is east and south. So don't take me to task on that geographical area. I get it. So Robert Moss to close the first hour, and then we'll go to the second hour. One guest, but a big enough guest to carry both sides of it. You ever heard of a guy named Aaron Franklin? Yeah, he'll be back. We're going to spend a lot of time talking to Aaron about his offset barbecue pit that he now has for retail sales, building out a dealer network. But You can also go DTC. So you can go to franklinbbqpits.com if you don't have a dealer near you and buy one directly. So we'll talk about the offset pit, the size, the engineering that goes into it, all the weeds that typically we don't get into when it comes to cookers, because I think there is an affinity for Aaron to set his cooker apart and get nerdy with it, which he can do. And I think we want to do that in this instance. So we'll talk to Aaron all about that. Once we've wrapped that portion up, we might get into a little restaurant talk. He's got a new restaurant that opened up half a year ago, the Uptown Sports Club, which is not necessarily barbecue related. So Aaron Franklin, the entirety of the second hour, holding the top where I do second takes and promote the best moments and all that stuff. So that's what's happening here this evening. Meathead and Robert Moss first hour, Aaron Franklin second hour. Don't forget, you can follow me socially, Instagram, X, TikTok, and the Snapper Snaps at BBQ Central Show. We say good evening to those of you watching tonight through one of our video streaming platforms, Facebook or Twitch/BBQ Central Show, also on YouTube, which is youtube.com/at BBQ Central Show. We also have a YouTube poll question of the week. And I'm wondering, on the heels of a great best moments of the Barbecue Central Show in 10 minutes or less this past Friday, the question I'm asking everybody, including all guests, you are fully aware of who Dan from Wauchula is in relation to the show, yes or no? And currently 64% of you are saying yes, you are aware of who Dan from Wauchula is. I'm not going to sit here and call anybody a liar. And I see the number of votes that are currently cast. I'm going to guess that more than half of that 64% are liars. You don't know who Dan from Wauchula is. Or maybe I'm wrong. You caught the best moments of the Barbecue Central Show in 10 minutes or less this past Friday, so you are at least aware. But it's just my general thought. I could be way off. So let's start here this evening. It was a topic in the second hour of last week's show, and it was it was a topic in the second hour last week, and it was there instead of leading the show last week because there wasn't a lot of information that could be substantiated, and there wasn't a lot of information coming from Kansas City Barbecue Society. I'm talking about the 2023 American Royal, especially the open portion. Well, a week later, at the very least, the aesthetic still remains weird. The final results for the open portion finalized sometime this past Friday night or Saturday morning. I couldn't put my finger exactly on it, but sometime in that time frame. And it's now showing Janky Leg Barbecue as the new grand champion of the open portion. And Machete Boys, who were announced as the open grand champions on Sunday night, dropping one spot to reserve grand. There are plenty of other teams that moved up or down in their overall standings as well, some dramatically up and down. There were also a few reports of ancillary category turn-ins like beans, sausage, things like this, that were initially lost. Subsequently, they've been found. There was also a Legends barbecue competition that took place that weekend, and the results from that contest were also messed up. Not necessarily from scoring issues or scoring changes, but reported to me that the list wasn't compiled correctly. Maybe we're splitting hairs at that point, but nobody's talking about that either. As I mentioned last week, I refuse to race to the internet airwaves so I can be the first one to talk about it. But more and more teams are reaching out to give me their take on the event and how it's affecting them. I've reached out to KCBS CEO Rod Gray to come on the show, talk about this in depth, and he said as of last Thursday night when I was corresponding with him, that he was not in a position yet to come on this show to talk in depth about it at this point. I did tell him that I had a number of very pointed questions to ask him when he comes on the show. Also, I told him that there were probably safer places for him to go and do interviews that might not ask questions that need to be asked that I will ask. But he said that he has never been one to shy away from tough questions or hide in general. So we'll see what pans out and what doesn't from an interview standpoint. If you don't see him on this show, I can say you would probably see him on, let's say, a Tailgate Guys barbecue podcast or whatever Luke Darnell's show's called. You probably see him somewhere like that. The bottom line is this. There's a lot of questions to be asked and answered. It's the biggest barbecue competition the KCBS sanctions each year. There are tech questions that need to be answered. There are results questions that need to be answered. There are number of judges to number of teams questions that need to be answered. And I don't know if anybody's even talking about that. There are the questions of how will this never happen again? Questions that need to be answered. So I will keep you updated on this as additional news comes out. If Rod Gray does come back on the show to discuss, I'll obviously let you know about that as well. This is very important. This is integrity stuff. And by the way, is nobody asking for an audit of the invitational side of things while we're at it? All questions to be asked. Meathead is ready to go. We'll talk to him here in just 1 second. Are you tired of settling for mediocre grilling experiences? It's time to step up your game and bring the ultimate flavor and cooker to the backyard. Pits and Spits Charcoal Grills, offering the highest quality live fire cooking experience that you can get in the market today using either wood or charcoal. Their solid fuel grills produce those classic flavors you're looking for when you have time to fire up the grill and cook for family and friends. With a large adjustable fuel tray, you can raise and lower the fire to control and fine-tune the heat. Their take on the very popular Santa Maria-style grill. Check them out at this custom website, pitsandspits.com/BBQ Central. That's pitsandspits.com/BBQ Central. And when you're checking out with that brand new charcoal grill, make sure you use promo code Charcoal Central, all one word, Charcoal Central, for $150 off that charcoal grill you just put in your shopping cart. Pitsandspits.com, and that's a double T on the Pits and the Spits. Pitsandspits.com/BBQ Central Show. Promo code Charcoal Central for $150 off any charcoal grill. You tell them the Barbecue Central Show sent you. We are back with our pal Meathead right after this. Stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Barbecue Central Show. Broadcasting live from the Barbecue Central Show studios in Cleveland, Ohio. You're listening to the Barbecue Central Show. Once again, here's your host, Greg Rempe.
Welcome back. This portion of the show being brought to you by cookinpellets.com, your number one source for quality wood pellets for all your pellet-driven cookers. You visit cookinpellets.com for more information. Check out all their offerings. And then when you're ready to buy, navigate away from cookinpellets.com and go to amazon.com or Lowe's.com or Walmart.com and buy from there. All the same great stuff to buy, great shipping as well that Cookin' Pellets can't offer on their website. They can ship to you from their website. They suggest using the other vendors for great shipping rates. By the way, I forgot to mention, I want to thank my pal Julian over at Garden State Barbecue for the bangin' shirt. Super special, super simple t-shirt, which I certainly appreciate. So Julian getting credit for outfitting your humble host here this evening. Coming up now, somebody you may have never heard of, not a first-time guest, a monthly guest, a Barbecue Hall of Famer, And more importantly than that, a Barbecue Central Show's guest Hall of Famer. One word and one word only, Meathead. We have a YouTube poll question of the week, Meathead, that I must get your honest reply to, which is this. You are fully aware of who Dan from Wauchula is as it relates to the show, yes or no?
I don't know if I know him as it relates to the show, but I believe I do know him as a good sauce and rub manufacturer.
No. That's Hot Wauchulas. That's Matt Barber.
Okay. There's a lot of barbecue people in Wauchula, I guess.
I guess that 2 is a lot from Wauchula, Florida. I can tell you that. So Meathead is back and better than ever. And we have 2 topics for the evening here. Let's start with the subtopic. Why not? One of the pillars of success that this show was built on was a segment that we did roughly 700 years ago, Meathead, when live fire was introduced. I still believe that both are separate cooking methods, but I'm not nearly as passionate to fight about it as I once was as a younger Greg Rempe. However, I saw your post on X, formerly Twitter, a month or so ago, where you said that using a griddle was not a form of barbecue or grilling. Can you explain why that is?
Well, it's outdoor cooking, so I'll consider it a project to be explored by grillers and smokers. But I really think that some of these hairlines dividing different cooking techniques are a bit artificial. I've been known to throw a frying pan on the grill. That's basically what a griddle is. It's just a big, giant frying pan.
Yeah.
But it's done outdoors. It's done with a flame. I don't need to get into the hair splitting. I love cooking on my griddle. I have a new one coming shortly, and it's done outdoors.
That's all we're saying.
Yeah, barbecue and grilling. If we're going to get into that topic, I think they're really hard to divide or define. And if you want to get into this debate again, we can. But people say, well, it's low and slow. Well, what's low? Under 300. So 299 is grilling, is barbecue, and 301 is grilling. I mean, where do you draw large cuts of meat? Our chicken breasts, chicken thighs, which they use at KCBS, is that
How about this?
not barbecue?
How about this as a delineator? How about this as the delineator? Indirect versus direct. Indirect heat barbecue, direct heat grilling. That is the biggest delineator. Maybe we can agree on that.
I do a steak reverse sear, start it indirect, finish it direct. Which one is it?
It's both.
Yeah. I just think if there's smoke and fire, it's one or the other or both, and I don't care. I don't care. I don't.
You're the one that said that griddling wasn't barbecue or grilling. I'm just bringing it up because you said it on the internet.
But I don't recall saying that.
I wouldn't make it up.
I'm not going to argue with you because I don't recall what I had for breakfast this morning. I don't recall saying.
Well, Mina, don't get on the blower and start posting stuff and then go, I don't know. Maybe you can do. I think people do that all the time on
I don't recall saying it. You got to find the evidence.
All right, I'll track it down and send it to you. We can talk about it next month. The other topic tonight is aging steak. And as I said in the open, we're constantly getting a revolving door of audience here, especially on the live portion. Maybe these folks don't have near the depth of experience that you or I have, or a lot of the longtime listeners, fans of the show that are also very accomplished competition cooks or backyard warriors that know aging of steaks. So,
well, aside from the expertise and the experience, there's a lot of misunderstanding. And my specialty is myth busting. A lot of people don't really understand a heck of a lot about them. So even if you're an expert, maybe we can get you something that you haven't figured out yet.
So let's talk about wet aging first. We'll save dry aging for last because that's my favorite. And are what we see in cryovacs, and we could probably talk a little bit about that as well from a packaging standpoint, is that what we would term as wet aging?
Well, yes. Let's take a step back and let's look at what happens after an animal is slaughtered.
All right.
When it's slaughtered, it goes through rigor mortis. And we're familiar with the term vaguely, but that's a point at which the muscles get very stiff. But there are enzymes living within and they're not living, but there are enzymes. These are compounds. They're the like little nano cooks, and they have the ability to change the structure of the protein. They don't affect the fats that much, but they change the structure of the protein. They break it down into new compounds like glutamates, which of course is umami, and so they alter the flavor. So you can't take a steer and slaughter it and eat it right away. It's going to be too tough. It has to go through rigor mortis. They call it green beef, and it has to age a little while until it begins to tenderize. And that tenderization can go on for weeks. Now, what's typical is the slaughterhouses or the packers will pack it in cryovac. Cryovac is a trade name. There are other brands of plastic bags that they're put into that are pretty tight. You know, cellophane wrap that we have at home, saran wrap, is actually oxygen can move in and out.
Yep.
Cryovac, it can't. And it's important that they go in there in a fairly clean condition. You can't have bacteria or microbes in there. It has to be fairly sanitary and no oxygen, and they shrink it down, and that now the enzymes can continue to work. And typically, things like if you're buying a brisket, you might find that they typically are aged for up to 28 days. 28 days seems to be a good number for aging beef in a cryovac or a wet aging, where the enzymes have a chance to do their job and make the meat tender. Now, there's something else that we should talk about with cryovac. Typically, when you cut into a cryovac bag, it's going to smell funky, and don't freak out. It's known as the cryovac stink, and that's just because there's no oxygen in there. You got a lot of myoglobin, you got a lot of chemicals going on, and the enzymes are changing chemicals. So when you cut into that bag, it's going to smell funky right away. It typically blows off within an hour, so don't be too bothered by that. And then it goes into this stage where it's more tender and more juicy, and it's really quite nice. And if you buy beef that is in cryovac, and often it will have the packaging date on there, and it's not 28 days, you can toss it in the fridge and give it a few more days.
So let's say we get to 28 days, whatever the packaging date is. I throw it in there for another week. That gets me to 28 days. Since there is an air moving in and out of it, can I keep it another 3 weeks? Can I keep it another 4 weeks? Like, where's the time, or what number day do I need to keep an eye out for before the meat would turn bad? And why would the meat turn bad if there's no air getting at it?
Yeah, it typically won't turn bad for a while, but it doesn't get any better. It seems that around 28 days, it gets to its peak. So if you want to try aging it longer in a bag, go right ahead. But it's not likely to improve significantly.
When you say it can stay good for a while, like, could it stay good for a month or two, or is that something you would need to figure out?
Sure. Not a problem.
So that's wet aging. Now let's talk about dry aging. And
this is entirely different.
Been around a long time. And but I don't want to be incorrect here. It seems like it's really gained steam over the last 10 years or so, where you're seeing it all over, not just high-end steakhouses, but let's say medium to high-end steakhouses have at least a dry-aged offering. Maybe they're not taking it out to crazy days like some of the higher-end ones are, but you'll see dry-aged, and then you have to ask the server how many days is that, and they don't usually know, or it's usually like 28 days, which is, the standard wet age too. So let's talk about dry aging and what it does and why it may or may not be good.
Well, first of all, it's not all that new, but you're right. It's gaining popularity in this country. The Egyptians used to dry age beef, And if you go to Europe, dry aged meat is quite common. They often will hang meats at at um, uh, at cellar temp,
Mm.
which is around 55. It's not all that cold. Especially game birds. So it's not unusual to age meat around the world, but it has caught on, particularly beef, ribeyes, especially strip steaks, especially. Um, it's done without the cryovac bag. It has to be kept in a temperature control and often humidity control. There's some controversy now around how crucial humidity control is. We know it has to be between 34 and 38 Fahrenheit, or that's ideal. Over 38, it becomes susceptible to bacteria.
Yeah.
And in fact, mold and bacteria do attack it on the outside. And I sent you a picture. I don't know if you can throw it up on the screen of a 65-day dry aged ribeye.
Mhm.
And if you have listeners have video that you can see, it looks pretty. It looks like a rock. It's heavily oxidized.
Yeah.
I've seen it where it's completely covered in mold. Um, but once you cut off maybe a quarter inch, the meat underneath is just gorgeous. But it's dehydrating. The enzymes are rocking and rolling. Molds are rocking and rolling. Bacteria are rocking and rolling. Oxygen is oxidizing. Some people like to call it controlled rot. It actually dehydrates a bit. It shrinks about 5%. And then if you trim off all that black and gray stuff from the surface, you're going to lose another 15% or so.
Oof.
So you might lose up to 20%.
Wow.
One of the reasons why it's so expensive. But while the water evaporates, it shrinks the meat and it physically shrinks in size. The fat doesn't shrink because there's little water involved in fat. So the ratio of fat to meat increases.
Hmm.
So you're going to get more marbling essentially. And you get a fattier sensation, but fat oxidizes faster than protein and muscle meat. So the fat will change and it will if you've ever been in a Chinese butcher shop or in Italy where they sell sausages and prosciutto, this smell. It's a funky, mushroomy, earthy smell that comes. Not everybody likes it. And before you
Hmm.
embark on the process of home aging beef, I strongly recommend that you do what I once did. I took my team to a restaurant that had aged beef, and there were four of us, and we each ordered a different age. We ordered 28, 35, 65, and 75-day aged steaks, and we shared them around the table and discussed them and found our favorites. Mine are the 28 to 35. I don't like them. The flavor really changes. They get if you don't like lamb, for example, it doesn't taste like lamb, but its flavor is as different from beef as lamb is from beef. It's an unusual flavor that not everybody likes. Some people absolutely crave it. If you're among those who absolutely crave it, you can do it at home, but you can't do it, or you shouldn't do it with individual steaks. It's really hard to do it. Now, Alton Brown did it with individual steaks. He has this elaborate process. I write about it on AmazingRibs.com. If you want to read more, you can go to his sites and find his video where he's wrapping it in paper towels and all kinds of stuff. It's best done with whole hunks like a rib primal, which is 7 bones or more, and or a strip steak primal, a big chunk of meat, and what you do is you should have a separate fridge for this,
Mhm.
where you can dial in the temperature. You can clean it all out real thoroughly with chlorine, let it air out so there's no chlorine smell. You put a pan, a baking pan in there, fill it with salt, put a rack on top so that any drippings will fall in the salt and the salt will absorb any funky smells. You got to control the temperature, keep it under 38 and above 34. You don't want it to freeze. Humidity control is trickier, but they say 70, 80% is ideal. Again, there's some question of how crucial that is.
Hmm.
and then you can age it. And when you want, you can cut off a steak, or you can cut it all up into individual steaks and freeze them. And now there's a whole number of commercial devices. There's something called UMAI, UMAI, which is a bag that you wrap the meat in, and it allows air in and out. And it does a very credible job, and it's not terribly expensive to assist with the aging and prevent any funky stuff from happening. There are a couple of like steak aging boxes. There's something called the Steak Locker and the Steak Ager Pro, which are small refrigerated units that have temperature and humidity control. You can buy these devices, but they work rather well. In fact, we hired a chef who ran a restaurant famous for aged steaks, and he reviewed these products for us. And we have the reviews on AmazingRibs.com if you're contemplating getting into them and you want to comparison them. Chef Rick Gresh, who is a famous steak cook.
I would reiterate what Meathead has said. If you're somebody that is looking to get in to dry age or dip your toe in the pool, if you will, try 28 days first. Then push it out, 30 days until you get to a point where you think you've had enough. And then go another 30 days outside of that so you can really get the end of the spectrum of comfortableness for your palate. What I found is this. There are pretty big jumps, but I noticed between 60 and 90 days, there was a jump, but it wasn't nearly the jump that 30 and 60 days was. So I didn't find it. I'm going to use the word offensive. I didn't find it as dramatic from 60 to 90 as it was from 30 to 60. So I just couldn't find 120 days to go out and try. What's the most dry aged steak that you've had days wise?
75.
75.
And keep in mind, there are numerous other variables. Was this USDA Prime, Choice, or Wagyu? Was it grass finished or grain finished? The weight of the meat and the age of the steer. These are all factors that can enter into the final outcome. So it's not, remember, always, people often ask me, I did your pastrami recipe 10 times. It was fantastic. The last time I did it was awful. What went wrong? Well, you're not dealing with widgets that get pucka kicked out by Ford Motors. These are animals, and they vary. So you've got all those variables, and which enzymes are there, and how long it's been since it was killed, and how long it's been handled. Little things like when you get that steak home in a cryovac bag, you need to wash that cryovac before you open it to make sure there is a minimum of bacteria on the surface. All kinds of things can happen. It's tricky, but it's fun. And if you're serious about it, if you've had aged beef and you love it, and you want to set up a little mini fridge like a dorm fridge, go for it. One other thing I forgot to mention, I put a little fan in there, like the kind that you buy it for computers. It's
like
an
a
AC
CPU fan.
Yeah, it just runs. It's very small, very quiet, but it keeps air moving. You want to keep the air moving inside the fridge.
If you have any other further questions or you want all this great information on a website, we might direct you to something called AmazingRibs.com. And then for an additional price, if you want to really nerd it up, you can join the Pitmasters Club. And maybe we have something to talk about next month about that. Maybe not. I don't know. But for now, you can go and join the Pitmasters Club and share some great information or get great information. You get a whole bunch of other great stuff when you sign up for that as well. And you can find Meathead right here the second Tuesday of every month. Meathead, always appreciate the time. And good on Chicago Bears for getting their first win of the season.
Yeah.
How about you? Good for you.
And hey, a word to Robert Moss.
Yes.
Don't let Daniel Vaughn stare you down, dude.
That's right. We're macho here. Meathead, always appreciate the time. We are, if nothing but courageous on this show, as somebody once said in a past interview segment. So that's Meathead, AmazingRibs.com. It's funny. one or two previous segments as we were leading in talking about football, I somehow as a Cleveland Browns fan, I felt superior over to the Browns. And then fast forward here now to week 4, and somehow Chicago's in a better QB situation than Cleveland? What the hell happened? I honestly think that Deshaun Watson is really hurt. The messaging has gone from shoulder injury to rotator cuff overnight. I think the odds of him playing this weekend are about less than 50-50. This is bad. Justin Fields is a better quarterback than Deshaun Watson. Who would have thought? What do we love about ceramic cookers? We love that they're fuel efficient. We love that you can achieve low and slow temperatures for traditional barbecue meats. We love that you can get rip-roaring hot for the temperature of grilling steaks and other thin cuts. But what's missing in the everyday ceramic cooker lineup? The real ability to do true two-zone cooking. Two-zone cooking is important to both professional and backyard cooks alike. It's the best way to manage a fire and cook with confidence. However, getting a two-zone fire in a round ceramic cooker isn't very realistic. Why? Because it's round. Now, I'm going to break off the read and go real-life experience. Saturday, I forgot I had some steaks from the KC Grilling Company. They're going to be on here in a couple weeks. Send me some Wagyu chuck-eye steaks and a strip steak and a Denver steak. And it was terrible weather outside. I didn't want to be messing around, so I seasoned them up, dumped them in the sous vide. And then after a couple hours, everybody back home, we're going to get ready to eat these steaks. Went outside, set up the Primo. So a lot of coals on the left side, got the divider plate. Then I put the deflector and then a grill grate on top opposite the coals. Got the coals rip-roaring hot. Now, a couple girls like the steaks a little more done than the rest of us, so those went on a couple minutes ahead of time. Again, on the deflected side, opposite, no coals underneath, so they're just getting some nice residual heat. And then when it was time to finish, we dropped those steaks down right on the coal side. Oh, my God. Never mind, it was raining like crazy for the 48 seconds I was out there on the Primo. Who cares about that? I'm a man's man. But the Primo gets so hot, rip-roaring. Now, Chris Young says you don't need any more than 325. I get it. But I'm constantly flipping, building that crust. No heat momentum to ruin my steaks. And then shut the top vent, shut the bottom vent, thing extinguishes out. I got 2 or 3 more cooks left in that load of charcoal before I even refuel. It's great. PrimoGrill.com. Find a dealer near you and hook up with a Primo already. We're back with Robert Moss right after this. Stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Barbecue Central Show. Howard Stern, Jim Rome, Dan Patrick, and Greg Rempe. The Mountain Rushmore of talk show entertainment. Now, let's get back to the Barbecue Central Show.
And we thank Meathead for joining us last segment, talking about the aging of steaks, wet and dry. He claimed he didn't remember saying that griddling was an outdoor cook. Where else would I be inspired to even mention that as a subject? I mean, he wrote it on Twitter. What is he doing? Come on, Meathead. This segment brought to you by Fireboard. Monitor up to 6 different temperatures simultaneously. Connect to Wi-Fi for cloud-based monitoring or via Bluetooth if you have to. If you have smart speakers in your home, you're in luck because Fireboard fully integrated with most of those. And don't forget about the new Fireboard Beacon that is coming up, where you can get temperature and humidity readings through sub 1G or sub G1, but I believe it's sub 1G. You can find out more by visiting fireboard.com or call 816-945-2232. Paul Rosenberg, or Broadcast Barbecue, but Paul Rosenberg is saying, wow, Greg rocking the Garden State Barbecue t-shirt. Yes, of course. Julian sent me that shirt, and I said I would be honored to wear it on a show. So if you have a brand or a T-shirt and you want me to wear it on the show, just send it my way. I'll wear it. I don't care. I love it. I love when you people I love when you people add to my wardrobe. That's my favorite. I love it. Hey, my next guest is the contributing barbecue editor to Southern Living Magazine. He is also an author and a sometimes podcast host, restaurant reviewer, and regular contributor to this show monthly. I am, of course, talking about Robert Moss. Robert, we have a YouTube poll question of the week that I'm asking everybody, and I feel like a lot of people are lying, but we're going to ask that you don't lie here. You are fully aware of who Dan from Wauchula is in relation to the show, yes or no?
I have no idea who Dan from Wauchula is in relation to the show.
All right. Well, I certainly appreciate it.
I figured out from context clues from Meathead segment that Wauchula is in Florida, but that's about all I know on that subject.
Yeah, so there there is a very successful competition barbecuer named Matt Barber who runs the team Hot Wauchulas, which is obviously based in Wauchula, Florida, and then Hot Wauchulas is also a sauce and rub co-packer, does quite a bit of business down there. But Dan from Wauchula is totally unrelated. Well, I don't know if he's totally unrelated to Matt Barber, but Dan from Wauchula used to call into the show back when the live show was just getting its legs. And he was a card, to say the least. So we wonder what the hell is even going on with Dan from Wauchula. Hope he's doing well, if he's still alive. So appreciate your insight there. Currently 50-50 YouTube voters are saying yes or no. They know who Dan Wauchula
I don't feel
is.
so bad, Dan. I'm at least, batting 500 here.
This was such an off-the-wall YouTube question. I thought we were going to have 80 to 90% going, who the hell is that guy? And I'm surprised we're at 50-50. The only reason I can think about that is maybe they caught the show this past Tuesday for the best of, which featured a call from Dan, so they were indoctrinated 72 hours ago to who this Dan is, so they're just claiming that they know who he was, but he had many different phone calls. Anyway, last time you were on, we talked about the release of Southern Living barbecue, top 50 barbecue joints, and we talked about the top ones, how the list is culminated, or how the list is gone over and accumulated. And then subsequently, I had a quarterly visit with the editor from Texas Monthly Barbecue, and he didn't seem to have any problem with the list other than saying, hey, why not, Southern Living, stay off my lawn and leave the Texas barbecue joints to Texas? And we're so big, and we have so many restaurants. You can't do it just. Leave it the hell alone. Leave it to us. And then take all the other south, whatever that is, to Southern Living, and we'll go from there. Your thoughts?
Well, I have many thoughts. It definitely was a topic of conversation. In fact, we had a whole seminar devoted to that topic at the recent barbecue editors convention here in Charleston. It was between the chips and the fajitas. And I agree with Daniel on some point. I mean, he has a point or a few points. Yes, it's hard. It'd be a lot easier for me to not have to include Texas in the list. In fact, he had to get on a plane to get to, I think, El Paso to visit.
Sure.
I have to get on a plane just to get to Texas. It's a long ass drive from South Carolina. It would be a lot easier. Texas is big. I did a little math a little while ago, and in terms of square miles, Texas is bigger than Georgia, Alabama, both Carolinas, and Tennessee combined.
Wow!
So it's a lot of territory to cover. The population is just slightly smaller than those states combined. So it's a lot of territory to cover, and it make my life a lot easier. However, it's sort of hard to do a top 50 barbecue joints in the South list and keep Texas out. A lot of people, well, the first thing everyone would say is, where the hell's Texas if I produce that list? And no one reads the footnote, and no one would say that we decided that Daniel Vaughn did not want us to come into Texas. So we decided to leave Texas to Daniel. So as much as I would like to do it, I would not like to be on the receiving end of social media when I publish a list of the top 50 barbecue joints in the South with no Texas joints on it. Because you're not going to argue over whether Kentucky and Maryland and the Missouri is in the South, but it's a lot harder to argue that Texas is not a southern state in my book.
I was taken to task last month when I kept my harp on this whole Maryland thing with a guy going, hey, show me on a map where you think Maryland is in relation to Cleveland. I'm like, dude, I vacation in Maryland like 2 years in a row. I've driven there. I know where it is. Like I understand what you're talking about. But for my mental midget mind, when I think of the South, I immediately think of drawls. I immediately think of Southern sweet tea and nobody moving at faster than a snail's pace because they don't care to, and that's the way they do things in the South. I don't get that from Maryland at all. I mean, it's pretty. It's as north as the South can get, I guess. So that's the only reason I bring that up.
Yeah, we'll leave Maryland to the side for now. So, but going back to Daniel, um, he has a point. However, I will say this. I do thank him. He's doing a great job of covering Texas for me. There is no way I could visit all the barbecue joints in Texas.
Yeah.
He's doing a great job, sort of like a farm team. He's out there scouting for me. I sort of let him bubble up what's worth visiting, and then go check those out. And I did go do a little sanity checking just to make sure if I'm missing a lot. Is he out there just turning up all these fantastic restaurants that somehow don't end up on Southern Living's list because we don't have a full-time person embedded in Texas. I went back to the last list, which is 2021. There are, just looking at the top 10, of the top 10 lists, there are 9 out of the 10 I've been to that made his list. So I've covered all those. The one I've not been to is Evie Mae's, which is way out in Wolford or the outskirts of El Paso, way in West Texas. I just have not been able to get there, though I have met Arnis and Mallory at events, and I keep promising I'm going to get out there as soon as I can make it that way. So I've been to 9 out of 10. Of those 10, 7 of them made it onto the top 50 list. So it's not like he's out there turning up all these wonderful restaurants that don't somehow make it onto the list. Now, he and I do disagree a good bit on our criteria, and we'll lay it out. I think he talked a little bit about it. I'll be upfront about it. He focuses very much on the food.
Yep.
And his is very much about what's on that big old platter of meat and just sort of trying to judge the quality of the meat one after another. I focus much more, and I say this up front in the list, on the experience and on the overall atmosphere and a little bit bigger, more qualitative, I guess. I don't have a point system, and I don't grade the meat necessarily on a point system, but I'm covering a much larger area. I have a much more diverse slate of meats, and I'm not just comparing one slice of brisket to another. So we just have different criteria when it comes to that. So I think there's room for both lists and for overlap. And as much as I would love to not have to make the effort, because it is a lot of effort to get out to Texas. And by the way, Texas makes it hard on you because they all have lines that are 3 hours long. And if you don't get in them, you don't get to eat. And then they go till they sell out. So if you want to hit 6 barbecue restaurants in Texas in a day, good luck, because you're going to make one, they'll sell out. Now you get to the next one, they're gone. So you can usually do one a day. So I do appreciate the work that Daniel's done for me, though. He's really sort of helped be the Sherpa, if you will, to lead the way, and has done a great job. But I think we'll be coming back to Texas again next year.
I see what you're doing there. I have a couple follow-up questions here. So would it make sense for Southern Living to station an additional Texas correspondent only, so they can kind of do what Daniel does, but now it's a Southern Living person? Understand that it's your list, you're the one that does it all, but given the fact that Texas is Texas, size, girth, all that stuff, maybe it makes sense to install somebody there. Maybe you move from Carolina and go to Texas and become the competing Daniel Vaughn. We've lost Chuck Blount, of course, from the San Antonio Express News, so this could be a calling that we don't even know about.
Well, it could be. I would say that Texas Monthly is very unusual in having a full-time staffer who on staff who just covers barbecue. I don't know of any other publication that does that. Everybody else who writes about barbecue is sort of a part-timer who does it for they're gonna get paid, but it's not a full-time job for anybody. So I would love it if we could figure out how the economics would work to pay that person's salary. I would fully endorse it.
Secondly, in regards to how you're evaluating, is the delineator here that Southern Living's reader base is more concerned or more interested in the overall perspective, what you're giving, versus what Daniel and his team is doing, which is breaking down the meat good or the meat's bad?
I don't know. I don't know if that's exactly the case. I just think it's a different approach to barbecue. Yeah, I think Texas Monthly, and this is the nature of Texas, and barbecue is such a big deal in Texas and has just grown. And Texas Monthly has been a large part of driving that, and Daniel
Yep.
himself of sort of driving the Texas barbecue boom. It's become so big in Texas, it's sort of taken on a life of its own. There are people who will follow that Texas Monthly top 50 and treat it like a passport and check it off, and there's a whole barbecue subculture there that I don't think is quite as strong throughout the South. I think people throughout the South love barbecue. They love to eat it. It's sort of curious with Southern Living's barbecue. It almost falls under the not the food area because Southern Living does lots and lots of recipes and cooking type things. It really falls more under the travel area. It's much more along the lines of you're traveling around the South. Where do you want to go eat? Where do you want to stop off? As places to visit along the way, which is a little bit a different way of looking at it than the way Texas Monthly does it. I don't think that necessarily it filters through. I think the lists are probably more a reflection of Daniel's personality versus mine, less than it is about the particular editorial stance of the publication. But I do think that the way I approach it certainly fits in a little bit better with Southern Living's just general sort of general editorial approach than if we were trying to be very hyper focused on barbecue and run barbecue features every week.
Daniel wrote an article recently about the Texas bubble of barbecue bursting or being on the verge of bursting. As somebody who spends time in Texas at any given moment, like yourself, your thoughts on the article, and could that also be expanded across the globe or across the nation?
Yeah, I thought it was a great article. I think it really did a good job and really talked to a lot of people, and I think put his finger on a definite trend that's happening with a lot of things. I think a lot of that bubble was fueled. It sort of started with the trendiness of barbecue before the pandemic, but then the pandemic really shifted that. You had a lot of people who sort of shifted careers, who decided to move into this new thing at the same time that the barbecue was taking off. I think you and Daniel talked about it. You have a lot of folks who are setting up food trucks. They're maybe running on a Saturday or Friday
Yep.
and Saturday while they're doing other jobs. And I think that's sort of been building, and I think it's just stronger in Texas. It always amazes me when I go to Texas, just the sheer number of barbecue operations that are there. You're just driving down the road and there's a guy over here with a truck, and there's a guy over here with a stand, and it's just all over the place. So I think it's a little more pronounced in Texas than I see it elsewhere. But I think that is, it's one thing to launch a business. It's another thing to keep it running for a year, 2 years, especially at a time when we have just the food prices, all your supply prices are going up and up and up. So I think you're seeing convergence of a lot of forces in Texas. One, which is the boom of barbecue drawing a lot of people into it. So now you got a very crowded market. But then on the other hand, you got brisket prices going through the sky. I do think it's a little ironic that uh, Texas brisket is now taking the world by storm, and as a result, it's threatening Texas. So the supply of briskets and making it more expensive. Yeah, I don't know what the hog prices are in comparison, but I would suggest maybe turning to whole hog as an alternative. But jokes aside, I think it's a serious issue that's confronting a lot of people, and I think a lot of things will see a boom. A lot of people will wash out of it, and I don't think barbecue is going anywhere, but I think the business is in for a bit of a shakeout in the next year or two. I don't know that it's as bad in the rest of the South as Texas, but I think it's a little bit different. I was actually just at a barbecue festival 2 weekends ago. I talked to a lot of barbecue guys. I don't hear them talking as much about the same issues. I think labor is still a big issue. It's starting to turn a little bit. I don't think barbecue joints elsewhere are necessarily competing head on with the other barbecue joints in town. They're more competing for restaurant dollars across the board. So it's not just, there's 8 barbecue trucks, which one is going to get the dollar. It's much more that there's, barbecue and there's burgers and there's tacos. There's lots of restaurants to compete with. That's more the dynamic I see. I think I'm hearing a lot. People trying to open restaurants are really struggling with costs, but it's construction costs, it's delays, it's supplies, it's restaurant equipment. So I think you're seeing some of the same pressures, but just a little slightly different, maybe outside of Texas.
We'll talk more about it next month on the recap side of things, but this coming weekend is the Jack Daniel's World Invitational Barbecue Championship. This coming off the heels of what has been probably the most controversial American Royal Invitational / Open contest that we've seen in recent history. What are you going to do? Are you judging? And then, if so, what do you look forward to in a judging capacity?
Yeah, I'm actually going to judge. This is the first time I've been to the Jack, and first time I've been a judge. It's a KCBS, I'll get my KCBS judging boot camp on Friday and get certified. I've judged quite a number of other barbecue competitions, but never quite with that scoring. I'm more just looking, to get there and just sort of, I've not been to Lynchburg before, which is. I'm not sure how, but I'm looking forward to just being there, looking forward to meeting everybody and spending time, and then just having the experience of being a judge in one of the big majors. And I'll try to make sure I keep my scorecard very neat and easy to read, and so it's easy to tally at the end of the day.
I need you to be the reporter's reporter and really track how you're feeling and what you think about this experience, because whenever I have anybody on the show, it's magical, it's picturesque, it's serene, there's an aura, blah, blah, blah. And then off air, they're like, that place is a shithole. I'm trying to figure out what's real and what's not. So when you come back next month, you're going to lay it all out.
I will give you the unvarnished experience. I will say I'm not going in with any romantic illusions. I've judged enough barbecue competitions to know that after a certain point, it gets to be just sort of drudgery. I mean, there's one box after another, and they keep coming, and then they all taste the same. So I'll be curious to see. This is probably the most formal experience I've had yet judging. So I'll be curious to see. Is it enjoyable, or is it just like, I'm stuck in a tent with a bunch of styrofoam boxes that I really want to get out of here.
We can't wait for the recap. That'll be next month. It's Robert Moss, robertfmoss.com, his website. Robert, always appreciate the time, and we'll see you in November.
Yeah, gosh, already.
All right. And good luck. Safe travels to the Jack. Hopefully that one goes off without a hitch. I know that's not a point accumulator for Team of the Year because it's invitational, and there were a number of teams left off. I mean, there's always teams left off on the side like there is every year. But this year especially seemed like there were a lot of teams left out. But such as it is, of course. That's the majesty of the Jack Daniel. Let's go ahead and wrap the first hour. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Continuing to produce incredibly mediocre content in an exceptionally professional way. You're listening and watching the Barbecue Central Show. Once again, here's your host, Greg Rempe.
And we thank Robert Moss for joining us last segment. robertfmoss.com, his website. You can see his readings, writings. You can listen to his podcast, see the restaurant reviews that he's done, all linked on over there. And he's a second Tuesday of the month regular guest here, 35 past the first hour, right after Meathead. Currently, 57% of you do not know who Dan from Wauchula is. And there's no way to do an instant poll on top of an instant poll here, but I'm wondering if a lot of you folks listened to the Best Moments show this past Friday and heard Dan. Also, you got to hear a Walt from Wilton, one and only time caller, secretly talking about horse meat and stuff like that. Yeah, that was weird. Also interested in hearing Robert talk about... was anybody else listening to the words that he was using? Daniel Vaughn is his AAA barbecue review team. I believe Sherpa was thrown around. Doing all the footwork so they can roll in there and give their own opinions. All right. Maybe I'm the only one that saw that, but I'm sure Daniel Vaughn will have something to say about that next time he's on. We are getting ready to head to the second hour. We have an all Aaron Franklin second hour, so stick around. We'll be right back. You're listening to the Barbecue Central Show right here on the Barbecue Central Network.
This is Bobby Rimpey from Cleveland, Ohio, and you're listening to Barbecue Central.
Happy to have you aboard here for the really big barbecue show.
Boing. We cook because we have to, and we grill because we want to.
Hit me.
Fine, how's it going?
You have a great show. I'm a big fan.
Boing.
So what seems to be the problem here? This man looks like he's dead, and he's in the crackle. Charbono! It's all about the charbono, dude.
Succulent fish. What?
He ate 2 feet or wiener. Oh, listen, Lavernius, shut your face.
I'm shaking like a dog shit peach seeds.
We have top men working on it right now. Top men.
And just like that, we are into the second hour of the Barbecue Central Show. We talk about the most important topics in the world of barbecue and grilling, live fire cooking, as they're happening during the course of the day, week, month, year. If they're in the news cycle, baby, we're talking about. Once again, shout out to Garden State Barbecue, Julian, with the bangin' t-shirt. Thank you, Julian. If you're not following him, I would say go to Instagram and search Garden State BBQ. And he's always giving you something super special and super simple. I got to have Julian on the show and see where those two descriptors even came from. He's leading off every video. Hey, there's like a process that goes on in all these Instagram videos that I see. I mean, I got to tell you, if I could somehow not have to do social media at all, not even outsource it, because I don't even want to pay, because I don't want to do it. Maybe that's showing my old man lawn age here. But if there's any way I could get out of it and not have it affect downloads or show visibility, show promotion, all this, man, I would just ditch it in a second. Like, as soon as the show's over, I'm out of social media. You will never see me again. You won't. You barely see me now. You will not see me again. Somebody will buy the show for multi-millions. I'll ride off into the sunset. And that'll be it. And if I ever get doing another podcast, I will have zero responsibility when it comes to social media. I won't do it. Long way to go to say, as I watch the most successful videos these days, they're on, I don't know what you would even call it, like a backwards loop kind of thing. So in Julian's case, he's always, like, the video starts with him going bang, and like that's his catchphrase is bang. Also, super simple, super special. Those are all his catchphrases. Every video, it's banging and super special, super simple. But the way that it's done, the video starts and he's like banging, and then the video recipe starts from the beginning, boom, 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 and he rolled to the end, and then he's tasting it, and then you're getting his reaction, and the reaction, of course, is banging, and it starts over. It's all timed out, very sexy. So I've followed Julian for a couple years at least, and then he was like pumping out content pretty regularly, and then he kind of fell off. I was also, I'm going to say, attracted to him, but not in the biblical sense, although he's very handsome and muscular. I was attracted to his content because when he wears a shirt, he always wears a cat shirt, and the company that owns my Peterbilt dealership group is Ohio Cat, so they're the biggest cat dealer here in, the only cat dealer here in Ohio, so hence the biggest. So I always had an affinity because he wears a cat. I don't know what his relationship is with cat, if he operates cat equipment or if he owns a cat dealership or whatever he's got going on. but there's a cat relationship there going on, whether he knows it or not, because, as I said, a cat dealer owns our Peterbilt group, locally, dealership-wise. And then all of a sudden, he was, like, gone. And now he's back, and he's upgraded camera, obviously. He's upgraded the sound. He's got the whole pattern down now. So if you're interested in seeing a lot of live fire cooking videos, but then he also does outside the box. He did a shrimp bisque or a shrimp soup or something last night that I just saw when I was at the doctor's office today. So if you're looking for somebody new and you're not already following him, Garden State BBQ. Nice plug for my guy Julian. How about you? Banging! Still to come on the show this evening, Aaron Franklin of Franklin Barbecue and Franklin Barbecue Pit, so stay tuned for that about 8 minutes from now. We say good evening to those of you watching tonight through one of our video streaming platforms, Facebook or Twitch/BBQ Central Show. You can also watch through YouTube, youtube.com/@BBQ Central Show. There is a YouTube poll question of the week, of course. 55% of you say you have no idea who Dan from Wauchula is. You know, maybe it's skewing to where I thought it was because everybody was under the impression that Meathead was under, which is you thought I was talking about hot Wauchulas, which is not what I was talking about. I was specifically talking about Dan from Wauchula, and you were thinking about Matt Barber from Hot Wauchulas. How many Wauchulas can there be, or how many barbecue people can there be in the Wauchulas? Is there more than one Wauchulas? Is there a South and North Wauchula? Florida, is there Wauchula Heights? In Cleveland, all the suburbs, there's like the suburb city, and then there's the suburb city Heights. So you have Cleveland, Cleveland Heights, Euclid, Euclid Heights, Shaker, Shaker Heights. You see what I'm saying? So is there a Wauchula Heights? I don't know. It would make sense to me, but maybe that's where the delineator was, or the confusion line. I just said Wauchula, and immediately everybody knows who Hot Wauchulas is in the barbecue community. So you thought I was talking about Matt Barber, but no. I was talking about Dan from Wauchula, caller to the show back in the old days. Just so we're getting that straight. Maybe that's why we've broken off on the no's taking the lead by 10%, now at 55%. No. Coming up on the best moments of the Barbecue Central Show in 10 minutes or less this coming Friday, episode 303, taking you back to September 4th, 2016. And my pal Sterling Ball of Big Papa Smokers was my guest this time around. We talked to him about getting back from what was the Sam's Club National Championship. Remember, back in the old days, there was something called the Sam's Club National Barbecue Tour, 3 rounds, so a local round. If you did well enough, you qualify for the regional round. If you did well in that, you qualified for the championship round held at the Bentonville, Arkansas home office of Sam's Club. So he finished 6th overall, and this was the one where there was a big number of 700-plus scores. Sterling couldn't have been more gracious talking about the event, his results. We also talked a bit about his cooking partner, James Perez, and how he came aboard and what his growth as a cook has been like to that point. Fast forward 7 years later, here in 2023, James, still on the team, has become a very accomplished cook. And as Sterling mentions in the interview, a very important part of the Big Papa Smokers team, especially after some of the other former members of Big Papa Smokers took off and left the team. It was just Sterling and then James, who was hired to be a driver for him initially. Don't forget, you can subscribe to the Best Moments show by visiting thebbqcentralshow.com/subscribe. And not only will you get every Friday's Best Moments show, you will also get every replay of the Barbecue Central show. So hour number 1 will be released every Wednesday. Hour number 2 will be released every Thursday. And then you get the Friday show if you subscribe. You can also just subscribe through email if you want. You don't have a podcast catcher, fine. You don't have to have one. You can subscribe through that thebbqcentralshow.com/subscribe. There is an email option. And also, if you want to hear a guest or segment again that you think's been lost in the archives, and a lot of requests are coming in now that the full archives have been reconnected finally, you can email our pal John Solberg, Jon, at thebbqcentralshow.com, and he will let him know what you would like to hear or a portion of the show that you would like to hear again, and he will do his best to meet your expectation. Once again, that's Jon at thebbqcentralshow.com, and you can have your very own best moments of the Barbecue Central Show in 10 minutes or less, made just for you. I got 30 seconds left before we got to go. That leaves me zero room. Tree chopping, no. Bloody Mary contest, no. Then, of course, I have my wife's vehicle thing that happened a couple months ago that I wanted to talk about. I still have a lot of stuff to get to that's in the hopper, but I'm not going to get to. Unrelated to everything, the fourth Tuesday of this month, and we're late by a month. Usually we do it in September. We're doing the 2023 Barbecue Central Show's Guest Hall of Fame induction. So we're going to nominate, vote, and induct a new class of 5 Barbecue Central Show guests. I listened to the 2019 version of that show. You got to go back and listen. It was unbelievable. Hey, Franklin barbecue pits are for the barbecue purists who want to take their craft to the next level. Skillfully made by hand right here in the U.S. of A. All American made steel, built to last, built with purpose. What you have with a Franklin pit is deeply thought out, a refined version of the old propane-style cookers that he has in his restaurants. Stylistically, it reflects the bare-bones industrial handmade aesthetic that Aaron loves, as in the patina and the way the build allows you to see the welds and the craftsmanship. The schematics of a Texas-style offset barbecue pit are relatively simple, even if the things that happened inside reflect our complicated dynamics of physics and chemistry. There's very few moving parts here, but there are numerous and massive differences between Franklin pits and the average barbecue smoker sold at the big box store. These units made from 5/16 and quarter-inch thick steel made here in America. Anything that sees heat engineered to be incredibly solid should last a century or more if cared for properly. You can't overstate how important the thickness of the steel is. This guarantees professional-grade heat retention, the key to making great barbecue, of course. Every Franklin pit unique to itself, its own patina, natural markings, even got its own number badge. Franklin pits can be found at fine barbecue specialty stores in select regions of the country, like Hartville, Ohio, or other places. You can find one at franklinbbqpits.com. If you're a fan of this show and you have a store, you want to become a certified Franklin dealer, fill out a form at franklinbbqpits.com. If you're a fan of the show and you want to own a Franklin pit, but you're not nearly a certified dealer, you can buy one on the website, franklinbbqpits.com. Purchase that pit right there on the website. It'll ship right to your driveway. If you have any questions along the way, make sure you use the Contact Us link at the bottom of the website. And that website is franklinbbqpits.com. In fact, you might have a whole bunch of questions about what the hell is this Franklin pit all about. Well, good news. In about 28 seconds or so, we're going to be talking to the guy that made the pits. So we're going to go into the weeds on offset pits, specifically Franklin's pits. So stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Barbecue Central Show. Howard Stern, Jim Rome, Dan Patrick, and Greg Rempe. The Mountain Rushmore of talk show entertainment. Now, let's get back to the Barbecue Central Show.
All right, welcome back. This portion of the show being brought to you by pitbarrel.com, the most unbelievable outdoor cooking device on the planet. Available in 3 sizes, all the accessories. If you're a beginner or a professional, doesn't matter. Add it to the arsenal of cookers. Pitbarrelcooker.com and tell them Barbecue Central Show sent you. My guest in the second hour, easily one of the most popular names in the world and industry of barbecue today. In the past, you've seen him as a judge on Barbecue Pitmasters TV show. He has a master's class over at the Master's Class website. Shot a barbecue show for PBS, has a great YouTube channel, authored a number of very popular books, and also happens to run one of the most popular barbecue joints in all of Texas and all of the country, for that matter. He is a 2020 Barbecue Hall of Fame inductee, and most importantly, a 2018 Barbecue Central Show's guest Hall of Fame inductee as well. Oh, my God. He's back and better than ever. It's Aaron Franklin. Aaron, greetings and all of your Barbecue Hall of Famedness, both on the Barbecue Hall of Fame and the guest. Did you know you were a guest Hall of Famer?
No, I actually had no
Well, congratulations.
idea. Well, thank you so much. I feel
2018
amazing.
was the inaugural class of the Barbecue Central Show's guest Hall of Fame. And we did it right. We put in like a swath of guests right into that Hall of Fame. Certainly, you fit the mold for maybe at that time, best one-off guest, or we had a bunch of different nonsense going on the first time around.
I'll take whatever I can get.
Yeah, I mean, why not? So Hall of Famer indeed. Look, many folks know of the accomplishments that I've listed out in the intro, but for the past number of years, you've been working on barbecue pits to bring to the market. A high level. When did you start trying to make barbecue pits in the first place?
Well, the first barbecue pits that I started making, well, the first one was shortly after we opened the barbecue trailer in 2009. And my first cooker was a 500-gallon size cooker out of a propane tank. And I built that obviously because Franklin Barbecue needed a lot more food than we were able to make, because we, maxed out at 12 briskets a day on the first 500-gallon. So built another one, and that's kind of when I'd already spent a good bit of time staring at fires, cooking ribs, and doing all this stuff. And, I kind of made like the smokestack collector because I thought it seemed like a good idea. And I was kind of thinking about how the insides worked and where the air goes and what's happening with bark and all that stuff. And that's been a while. So I've learned a lot since then. Kept building big ones for the restaurant. And then when Jordan McKay and I were working on the first book in 2014, that summer, we did a chapter on how to build a barbecue pit. And so that's the first small one that I ever built. And really from there, kind of fired it up. And I thought to myself, this thing really works pretty darn good. So then I started refining that design. And that took quite a while. I don't really even think we started selling proper Franklin pits till, oh, golly, I want to say 2020, right at the beginning of the pandemic, I guess.
It
took that long to get there.
Do you have both that first 500-gallon and that first backyard pit still?
So the first backyard pit was at the Yeti headquarters store until a few months ago. We swapped it out with a proper, like, newer Franklin backyard pit. So that one is sitting at the shop. That's the one from the book. And the original 500-gallon is actually in Los Angeles. Adam Perry Lang's using that right now.
Is that on loaner?
It is. It is a loaner.
But
I really want to get it back.
Like, why wouldn't he buy it at this time? I mean, he does all these pop-ups. Why not just buy it?
Well, it's not for sale.
Oh, everything's for sale.
No, not that one. That is the one cooker that I've got such sentimental value for. I mean, I have spent countless nights just cooking beef ribs on that, cooking pork ribs, briskets. And that was the OG. That's the one where I had like so many light bulbs go off for me, like staring at fires, be like, oh, I want to tweak this. I want to move this thing a little bit. Ooh, what happens if I do this? And that's when I feel like on that cooker is when I actually started to become, in my opinion, a pretty good barbecue cook.
When does the rental term come up on that one then?
Boy, that's a good question. I probably pretty soon. I guess at this point I need to build him a replacement.
Yeah, he seems to be doing pretty regular pop-up business out there in California. It seems to be very popular too.
Yep, I think every Saturday he's doing pop-ups with that thing.
Wow. Had you ever considered making commercial barbecue pits instead of backyard pits?
No, not really. I've built a couple for some friends and restaurants and stuff like that, but I've always kind of had a weird thing where I didn't really want to build the big ones because so many people were asking for them and stuff. It's like, I hate to kind of like sell something really expensive for somebody to make money on. Like I really wanted, my focus has always been on like backyard stuff. Like I want to help like the little guy, and which is weird because when barbecue pits first started, steel was a fraction of the price that it
Yep.
is now. So, you know, the original plan was to build a really awesome cooker that could kind of like every man's backyard kind of thing. And of course, you know, lots of things have happened since then, and cost of materials and stuff is just crazy.
Let's talk about the build of this backyard cooker. And, we'll just ask a general question here to start and get into the weeds from there, which is what I want to do. Why do you have what you have on that cooker?
Well, so, you know, from cooking so much food on these things and staring at fires, kind of started to design the cooker from the inside. So if you think about like fluid dynamics, you think about how you need to introduce moisture, you need to let moisture escape, you have intake, exhaust, all these kinds of things. The inside's rounded, it's kind of like, you know, ports, like, you know, like heads on an engine. It's kind of was a lot of my inspiration for this stuff, but even like the smokestack collector, you know, no right angles anywhere in there. We've got the heat, you know, shelf in there where the little water pan goes. That helps create, you know, chaotic airflow and all these things. So really, you know, it's not what it has. It's kind of like more what it doesn't have. I mean, it's just such a simple tool. And that is also by design that like, you know, the missing ingredient for awesome barbecue is your hands. Like you need to have a good tool and you need to know how to use something. You need to know how to pick up a piece of wood, know how to burn it, know what to get, you know, what you want out of it, know when to push the fire, know when to pull back, know when to hit the temps, know when to get more airflow and all that kind of stuff. So I really designed the barbecue pit to be able to allow someone to do that. And really, it's kind of my ultimate cooker. I mean, even now when I fire one up, which is pretty often, I've kind of got a random, you know, thing going on in the backyard. We'll drop one off, pick one up from the shop, and every single one I fire up is exactly like the other one. It's the most consistent cooker I've ever cooked on. But that being said, it was designed from the inside out. You know, really with a super focus on airflow, convection, all that stuff, clean fires, good flavors, more transparent flavors out of firewood. That's why it doesn't have a damper on the back. Don't want you making dirty fires. But, you know, with just kind of that stuff in mind.
So when you're looking at an offset cooker, I think a lot of folks can put some basic thought into how it might work or how it might operate, even if they've never run one. But in your cooker, a bit more involved. So take me through these thermodynamics that you talk about when you talk about chaotic airflow. I mean, I don't know what the hell that means. And like, what does that even look like? And how are you able to tell what chaotic airflow looks like?
Well, if you think about, you know, like airflow, right? A lot of people, when I started cooking barbecue, people were making barbecue pits that had these dampers and stuff in there. And I always kind of just assumed that air came in from a firebox, it went straight across the grates, and then it went straight out. Like it's not linear. It just doesn't, things don't move like that. So when you think about like, say like a tornado and you've got these vortices or you've got like wind that's hitting a flagpole, you know, and it starts to move around. And then when you start to think about that kind of stuff, you're like, oh, well, this, you know, that's a light bulb. That kind of starts to make a little bit of sense. So if you think about the inside of a barbecue pit, like you can't push a fire, you know, like all these little fans and like, oh, you're blowing on fire. Like you can get it to ignite, but a properly operating offset needs to pull air. You don't want to push it because then you get a bunch of embers, bunch of ash everywhere, and then it just burns out. So you're forcing a fire to do what it naturally doesn't really want to do. So in these big cookers and the small ones and the little Franklin backyard ones have tremendous amounts of airflow. I mean, they're so fast and articulate. I love how these things work. But that means you got to pay attention too. You can't just walk away and like go get a sandwich and come back with a sixer and be like, oh, you know, it's still warm. It should be fine. You know, so you think about this airflow and how it kind of moves around on the inside. So you've got this pull, you've got a big smokestack, right? The smokestack's about 42 inches tall. They're 4-inch diameter. They're ground smooth on the inside, so you don't create soot and all this kind of stuff. There's a lot of little details that went into this stuff, and all just from building cookers and cooking on them. It's like, oh man, I got to do the handles like this. This is how I prefer them. But if you're pulling the fire, you kind of think about this airflow a little bit in the way of like, say, I don't know, say like your AC vent in your car, right? You've got this air and that is being pushed for sure, not pulled. Yep. But then you have these little fins, you kind of guide it and you decide where it wants to go. So you can't really in the, not to get bogged down in like the philosophy of fire, because that's kind of dumb. I mean, it's fire, big deal, right? But what you do with it is a big deal, and you can't really force a fire to do what it doesn't naturally want to do. And part of that is giving a fire enough air, giving a fire enough fuel, giving a fire a big enough coal bed so it can, burn like a hotter combustion to get to the sweet spots, right? So when you smolder a fire, it's more oil soluble, right? So that sticks to like the fats, and it lays on your tongue a little funny. It's like, creates creosote, some off flavors and stuff like that. But as you go through that spectrum of combustion temperature, about 688 degrees is kind of the sweet spot, I think. That's what all the Franklin fireboxes are usually burning. But then you get this fast combustion temperature, right? And that means you got a good coal bed, all this stuff. But it's really, that exists because you can pull all this air through this massive amount of space, right? You with me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I might bring this all back around. Who knows? So you got this massive amount of air, right? You got a big coal bed, super hot fire that allows you to burn clean. So that changes the solubility of the smoke particulate, right? That goes from oil solubility into water vapor. So thus you've got a water soluble particulate in this smoke. And that's when people talk about like, oh, blue smoke, or you can't really see the smoke. That's because the spectrum of light picks up on different size particulate that's got different solubility. So you've got a crazy hot firebox. And this is more for like the big, like 500s and 1,000-gallon pits, because you've just got more space, right? You're not, constrained inside of a tiny cooker. But when you've got that airflow, you've got this hot thing, you've got a vacuum coming from a smokestack, what you do with that fire, and that's why you don't want to like damper things, because you want to like be able to lay a piece of wood down, pick it up, get a little bit of air, slow it down, speed it up, because fats and things happen at different times, like in a fire, right? So things render, you might want more airflow. So you need to have that control. That's why I kind of try to make it like really, really sensitive. But so you've got this air going through, high combustion temperature, and then it hits like a heat shelf where that little water pan thing goes in, right? So what's happening there is that thing is helping to create the actual airflow. Because if you had the air just blasting right through the cook chamber, you're going to tear up the points, or well, depending on how you orientate your meat. But say briskets and the fatty sides towards the firebox, you're going to get so much air on the backside of that point, it's going to dry out. It's never going to hold up to a 12-hour cook like that. So you need that air to start to swirl around. And that's where like this chaotic airflow thing comes from. And that shelf in there really helps that. And that's the thing that I started working on way back in the day on, little backyard, or not backyard pits, but Franklin, big, like proper cookers at the restaurant, is like adjusting that thing at an angle, or maybe I round it, or maybe I pull it back, or maybe I extend it forward. I've had so many cookers that were like adjustable flappers in there that I could play around with, because I was thinking of like an AC vent, right? Well, it turns out that's actually kind of dumb, because it didn't work. So it turns out just having like a flat one is totally fine, rounded at the end so it doesn't create creosote and stuff. But what's really happening in there is you've got this hot, stagnant air on top, right? That's where your water pan is, because there's no air. It's just sitting there. And then you've got fast moving air coming underneath it. So it starts to create a swirl. It's like a bimetallic strip, right? So then it curls, and then the inside of the thing is round. And one thing that I noticed around this point is that I actually like a little bit of inefficiency in the door. And this is kind of why offset cookers are great, because you would never cook anything at 688 degrees, right?
Right.
Like that's way too hot. But offset cookers are so inefficient that you can burn a really, really high combustion temperature and then still manage to cook at 230 or 250 or 300 or whatever you're doing. But what I realized about the door thing is that when you tweak metal and stuff, and this is more, visible on propane tanks and stuff. That's why we roll our own stuff from flat, pickled steel. But when the door cracks open, it actually starts to suck in cooler air. So that happens to create some spin. So then you've got like all this airflow. So you've got the heat shelf, things are starting to curl, and then they start to twist. And that's where you get this kind of like vortice situation. It's really low CFM. So that stuff doesn't really calculate. But it's a lot of airflow is the point. And that's what you really have to get like a super good bark on a brisket. That's why, barks are kind of soggy if you're like on a water cooker or like something that's retaining all this moisture, because you can't let the moisture escape fast enough. So anyway, that's pretty much the gist of the design. Wow, was that one heck of a rabbit hole or what?
I mean, I totally understood every second of it, and good for me. I'm maybe on the same mental level as you. Everybody else is probably well
You mean
behind.
sitting in a tool shed?
We're bringing them up. Let me ask you specifically about the smoke accumulator or whatever that thing is off to the left-hand side.
Yeah, the smokestack collector.
Yeah. So what is the purpose specifically?
Well, the purpose of that is, since you've got this big draft, you got a vacuum with a big stack and all the stuff. If you say, like, you've got a cooker and you've got a smokestack that's coming right out of the top, right? All that heat's going to maybe swirl around, maybe it's not, depends on how it's designed. But it's eventually going to make its way to the top of the cook chamber, and it's going to suck right out.
Yep.
It's not going to cross the meat. So then if you lower that down in the middle and say it's not at the end quite yet, we're going through the whole, like my first cooker was cut off at the top, and then I extended it, and then I moved it up front.
Oh.
So I'm going in chronological order here for me. So then you extend that thing down, and it starts to pull the air down closer to the grate, but then you've got a huge dead space between the head of the propane tank or the front of the cook chamber and where the smokestack is, right? So then all this air is kind of moving around. It's like, it's kind of hanging out, and then it's like, shloop, then it wants to go out. So my thinking is that, and this is where the internal combustion engine stuff kind of comes in, because I like to work on cars, and I'm a self-proclaimed tinker of all things. So I started thinking about the smokestack collector, and I drew it out on a sheet of plywood, traced off the front head of a 500-gallon cooker, and traced it off. And I was thinking more of like how a carburetor would have like its intake like curved, or like an engine, like the heads would be like ported and polished, like they're smooth, right? Which totally makes sense. You don't want hard lines because fluids don't move like that. They don't hit a 90 and then I can move. You got to guide things very smoothly. So that really accelerated the airflow. But it also, with it coming out at an angle on the front of these tanks, it also opens it up. So it's not just a little hole right in the middle where you're concentrating this heat right there. It gradually pulls it down to the end of the cook chamber and then gradually pulls it out. So you can just suck the heat out and all the smoke and all that stuff where you want it. So again, like you have a vacuum and you can't really tell a fire what to do, but you can guide it. And part of the guidance is by being able to pull it through the cook chamber.
If you have a shorter stack, that would obviously reduce the velocity of the suck, for lack of
It very much could. If you cut it too short, it would kill the airflow. And if you cut it too tall, it'll kill it. So there's a sweet spot in there. And what I've always done is I'll cut them longer than I think. I mean, now at this point, I'm like, it needs to be about like this. And I can get really, really close. And who cares if you're within a couple inches, there's no difference at all. Like you just got to find the sweet spot ish. But you cut them long, you build a fire, you watch the fire. You can, and this is the art of a long firebox too, is you can pull the wood back, adjust the efficiency of the fire, or move it forward. And as you're doing that, you can see the flames kind of bend, or you can see if they want to go towards the back of the door, and you can kind of adjust that. It's like, this is the sweet spot of the firebox. But then you start to shorten the smokestack, and you see the fire change with each little adjustment. And then when you find the sweet spot, you stop right there. So for us, it's about 42 inches.
Help me understand why the water pan is in there. And I'm working off this impression. When I got into this, first cooker I ever had, Weber Smoky Mountain. So there's a water pan that sits above the charcoal bowl. There were other cookers out there, for instance, Backwoods. Myron Mixon makes a water smoker. So, these all have water pans over the fuel source. In many instances, especially like in a Weber Smoky Mountain situation, a lot of people talk about, it's adding humidity to the cooking environment. I'm sure to a certain extent it is, but it's not at a rolling boil where you have incredible amount of humidity that's getting, injected into the cooking environment. It's steaming a little bit, but it takes, 12 hours or 14 hours where you have to go in and refill it if you're doing an overnight cook. Is that water pan that's sitting on the shelf like really adding any humidity with the amount of heat that's, hitting there and then the amount of velocity of air that's getting sucked through the tube?
Yeah, absolutely. That is you don't need much water. Like you might have to refill it after a few hours. Sure, whatever. It's not that big. But you don't really need that much water. One thing to keep in mind about like a Weber Smoky Mountain, and I'm just going to talk about that one because I've cooked on
Yep.
those quite a bit. Like once you get your temperature, your like wet bulb temperature up to a certain point, it can only hold so much moisture in that air. And that like relative humidity is going to max out at like 90 whatever percent. I don't know off the top of my head. So like when you introduce a boatload of water, it doesn't matter because the air can only hold so much.
Yeah.
And you are steaming stuff. But one of the things to keep in mind also is that there's a balance in there. Now, if you're and a Weber Smoky Mountain doesn't burn particularly clean because you usually like load it with charcoal or like wood chunks, and it's just a different style of fire. Like there's a lot of ways to skin a cat for sure. But some of the flavors, the good flavors, I think, are like the sweeter, more transparent flavors out of the wood. And that is back to that solubility issue. Those are the ones that stick to the protein. But then if you've got so much moisture, you're almost fighting the flavors you're trying to get because you're steaming them back out of the meat. Like you're diluting your cooking environment, right? So when you have an offset, say, for example, we were to pull that water pan out, it's going to be a fine cook. But you're really more at the mercy of, is it humid that day? Did you have really high moisture content in your firewood? Because that factors in quite a bit also. So when you put that water pan in there, oh, and by the way, if you cooked with a water pan out, your edges might get a little crusty. They might get a little dried out on a brisket after, I don't know, 9 hours before you wrap it or if you don't wrap it or whatever. But when you introduce a little bit of water, you've got all this moisture going out, which allows you to get a good bark. But if you don't have that balance on the front side, then it's going to be too dry. You're getting too much moisture out of it. So you kind of got to find that balance. Like it's dry enough to get the good flavors and all that stuff and not kind of like dilute that cooking environment, but also just enough moisture from the water pan. I think like a third pan, half pan, quarter pan, anything in that range. We use little half pans on the big 1,000-gallon cookers at the restaurant, and that's fine. We fill them up every 12 hours. It's not a big deal. But if you introduce enough moisture, then you're kind of protecting the edges of that brisket, like the backside of the point. It's going to stay a little bit more moist, and that's really why you spritz also, because you kind of just like checking stuff constantly. Like, oh, a little dry, squirt. Oh, that's a little hot. Ooh, and just kind of doing pretty much damage control the entire time because you want to protect that, your little baby before you swaddle it in butcher paper. But you got a water pan, so it introduces enough moisture to keep the damage down, but also you're getting rid of enough moisture to dry out the brisket as a whole. So it's not just moisture in, moisture out. It's regulating that whole surface of a brisket so it's even, so you don't have a crusty edge with a moist middle, because once it starts to tense up, it'll start to like squeeze out all this moisture. And that's where you get like some balding and like some weird like patchiness and stuff like that. So it's just, it's more about damage control, I guess.
Can I put you on hold just for 1 second? And then
sure.
We'll come back. I have a couple other questions about the cookers, and then we can branch into some other stuff here. We're talking with Aaron Franklin from Franklin Barbecue Pits. The website, of course, franklinbbqpits.com. You can go there to find a dealer near you, or you can just buy one if you don't have a dealer near you. Listen up, gang. Our friends at Big Papa Smokers have something special just for you, listeners of this show. Whether you're a seasoned pit master or a grilling newbie, Big Papa Smokers, your one-stop shop for all things barbecue. For their championship rubs, mouth-watering sauces, essential accessories, they've got what you need to take your food to the next level, whether on the competition circuit or just in the backyard like me. Here's the cherry on top. Big Papa Smokers offering the listeners of the Barbecue Central Show an exclusive deal. Use the code REMPE at checkout, REMPE, and you'll get $10 off your next $50 purchase of rubs, sauces, or accessories. Imagine the possibilities. Evaluate your ribs with Big Papa Smokers' sweet money. Add Big Papa's Desert Gold to your chicken, or better yet, vegetables. How about Big Papa's Double Secret on your steak? That's a winning combination right there. Head over to BigPapaSmokers.com and start shopping today and save. Don't forget to use the promo code REMPE at checkout and claim your $10 off your next order of $50 or more. Don't forget to check out Big Papa's full line of recipes over at cookingwithbigpapa.com. That's cooking with with BigPapa.com. And, of course, follow them on all social media platforms at Big Papa Smokers. We're back with more Aaron Franklin right after this. Stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Barbecue Central Show. Whole packers, full racks, legs and thighs, injecting butts. If you've never heard this before, you might think you found the best XXX show ever. Let's get back to the most homoerotic host out there today, Craig Rempe.
And we welcome you back. Talking with our pal Aaron Franklin. On the firebox door, Aaron, there are no dampers, no spinners, no slidey things. Not to get too technical with you there on that term.
Doohickeys or chingaderos.
Yes, that's right. There are a number of oblong cutouts, and there's also a logo that's been cut in there as well. Why that, and not the accessible, or as most people would know, a damper of some sort?
Well, so that was kind of the trickiest part of that. And usually, at the restaurant, we're cooking on huge cookers, and we just leave the doors wide open because, again, you want to let a fire do what it wants to do. You want to be able to see it. You want to be able to watch the coal bed, watch the flames. You want to be able to hear the crack of the fire because that tells you a lot about how it's working and stuff. So when I started, I didn't want to build a barbecue pit that was heavily branded. Like I didn't want like big logos like sticking up. I just kind of wanted it to be pretty modest. So I thought it would be pretty cool to cut the logo in the back door. So the first firebox doors, and we've been through, probably 20, 30, 40 different firebox doors with different shapes, different size logos, different size holes in different places and all this stuff, and just swapping out firebox doors and burning fires. So the logo was fine, but you don't want to pull all the heat up top because you want to pull your air in from lower, because in the wintertime, and if you're burning a good fire, and really this is kind of why the firebox is 24 inches or 22 and a half inches long on Franklin pit, is because if you build your fire up front and you have the right size firewood and you're thinking about, like the cadence of a fire and big enough to always keep a coal bed, you need to have a place for those coals to live, right? So you kind of rake them towards the back, which means that you kind of change your coefficient a little bit. Like in the wintertime, for example, if you're raking your coals towards the back, you get to pre-warm the air that's going over the coals before it hits the fire. So your fire doesn't have to work so hard. So that is a cool technique. And that's a way that you get really even heat, because you're really not cooking on, you would never cook with like big flames. Like you're not getting much flavor out of big flames. You're getting your flavor out of just the wood and just the sugars that are cooking out of it, but you really have to have the coals, right? So those little slots on the bottom, ended up putting them down there because I wanted to be able to pull the air over the coal bed. And if it's the summertime, it's hot outside, leave the door wide open. Doesn't matter one bit. But in the wintertime rather, when it is cold outside, and this is a double wall that's got a 1-inch air gap all the way around it. So there's a concentric liner in there. It's actually kind of a complex firebox, but it is semi-insulated with an air gap in there. But in the wintertime, if you close that door and you've got the right kind of firewood, you've got the right, dimensions, I guess I should say, and you kind of have a feel for which ones you're picking. Are they kind of light? Are they kind of heavy? Whatever. The way that firebox actually operates is it super duper maintains the amount of airflow that's going through it. So for example, like there were a bunch of firebox doors that had little holes and the fire just didn't quite get enough air. And when I would open the door, it's like, poof, it's going. It feels great. This is cooking awesome. So then we just started cutting doors with a little bit bigger holes until we got there. And then I kept going a little bit bigger, like, oh, it's far too much. Let's go back down a couple sizes. And that's how we landed on that firebox door. It was really, there's a good bit of redneck science going on with barbecue pits, and everybody's got opinions, and I've got mine for sure. And I like to cook a certain way, and I'm smelling certain things. I'm hearing certain things. I'm, tasting certain things in the meat and stuff like that. But with that firebox thing, that was really I guess that's kind of what makes a Franklin pit in so many ways, like, because that really is a tool. And it's also kind of meant, if you can give the fire everything it needs, it'll hang out, it'll last. You got a good coal bed, you get to refresh wood at the right time and all that stuff. One of the cool things about it is, and what made me a better cook back in the day of cooking overnights all the time at Franklin, was the fact that I had to throw a log on a barbecue pit, every 5 minutes, but it got me in the zone, and it got me like really like where I would just listen to it and be like, oh yeah, number 5's too hot. I could smell it, but that was because I couldn't get lazy. And then one day at the restaurant, I remember I kind of built like these like dampers, because other people do this stuff, like, oh man, I'll try it, we'll see what happens. And I put these dampers on one of the cookers. It's like a 20-foot long cooker or something like that, up on a trailer. And after a while, it kind of made me lazy, and the ribs just weren't turning out very good on this cooker because I couldn't hear and I couldn't see the fire. So that was really kind of like where I'm a little stubborn on this too. I think eventually we'll probably make some kind of modification, I guess, maybe. But it's kind of stubborn on this firebox. Like, no, like, this thing is a tool. This is a really neat way to be interactive and learn how to be a better cook. And I feel like it kind of forces me, at least, like, I can't really walk away for too long because I got to throw another piece of wood on there.
Yeah.
But it really gets me in the zone. And I think, it's like the same thing as like you're staring at a phone, checking like, Facebook or something like that. It's like, just not paying attention. A lot of times when you have that disconnect and you can't really see what's going on in your barbecue pit, you kind of maybe might miss a couple things. You're like, oh man, it's too low. And then you overcorrect, or, oh my God, it's too hot. And then it kind of becomes a little bit harder to cook. But when you're kind of like really in the zone, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I think it's actually a lot more helpful in the long run. It may be kind of frustrating at first, but I think like once you kind of like really figure it out, it's kind of like, when you're tasting a whiskey and somebody says like, red hots, all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I taste cinnamon in this, or whatever. But it's kind of like what you don't really know until you get there. But once you kind of get there, you really can hone in on what you're looking for. And I think the firebox door design really gets you there.
Who's the customer for you? Because you're talking about stuff that I feel has been fallen out of love with by a lot of beginner and intermediate folks, which is, when I got into it, 2004, whatever the hell it was, you still had to learn how to build a fire, keep a fire, whether it was charcoal driven or a stick burner, whatever. And with the advent and subsequent popularity of, a lot of other cookers, whether it be through automatic draft machines or, of course, pellet cookers, you don't have to learn that life skill that makes you a man. You can bypass that. So who is your ultimate customer?
I think it's probably people like me that kind of nerd out on stuff in a lot of ways, and just like really is like, how good can I make this? I just want to I love a project, I think, I think pellet cookers have come like such a long way. And, after years and years of really not sleeping much, I can really get behind that too. Cause it's nice to be able to go to bed. It's nice to be able to have dinner with your kids and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
But if you really hone in on what you're looking for, and you really want like that just extra like 2% of perfection, and you just really want that, kind of the only way I feel to get there is to be able to control every aspect of a cook. And it's like, if you cook something in an oven, if you cook something in a pellet cooker, or in a whatever, I mean, there's all, like I said, there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, and there's a lot of different stuff out there, and no ding on anybody for not wanting to cook on an offset, because it is a lot of work. I mean, it really, you're hunkered down for 12 hours.
Yeah.
It's a real time commitment. And it can be frustrating, but what you can get when you kind of get good at it is that next level of like 2% perfection. And like, oh, I've never tasted that before. Oh, this fat never rendered like this. Man, I've never pulled off the flat and the point perfectly cooked at the same time. Like, once you kind of start to dissect some things, it kind of gets you into, almost like maybe like next level kind of stuff. And I guess, maybe for me, that's the kind of person I've always been. Like, I just really want to do the best I can. But I also like to tinker with things, and I also want to modify things, and I'm always looking to make something better. That's kind of the art of Franklin barbecue. I mean, 15 years into this, we're still making changes all the time and making things a little bit better. But I think, I hope the person that really would get excited about Franklin barbecue pits is someone that loves craftsmanship, that loves American made stuff. Like for me, it's like old hot rods and just like crafty things, like things that are made by hand, with people that really care, not in a factory necessarily. But also somebody that's really, I don't know, just wants to dig a little bit deeper. It's kind of the same thing. Like, you don't just chug wine. Maybe you start digging a little bit deeper and find out that you love carbonic maceration or whatever it is, or like with whiskeys or coffees or
cigars,
music, like always like digging a little bit deeper. So maybe that's the person, I guess. I guess maybe I've never really thought about it too much.
So the other side to this business is you're making cookers. Now you got to go sell them. So how do you land on a manufacturer, and how easy is it for you to find somebody who's going to execute at your level of expectation?
Well, it has been a journey, that's for sure. That's maybe why from 14 to 20 is when it took us that long to build a sellable pit. Kind of ridiculous. We've got two manufacturers that are absolutely amazing. We started off building all these cookers in Austin. We quickly outgrew our shop, our little 5,000 square foot shop. And, it's just, we couldn't quite get the steel that we wanted because we're down in Texas. So we really went up more towards the Midwest because we use all American steel. It's pickled and oiled, is what it's called. And it's kind of similar to like a stainless steel. Like it's a really, really high quality carbon steel, right? Mm-hmm. So it doesn't warp quite the same way. It doesn't have the tensions. It doesn't have some of the normal defects that you would get with some cheaper steels. But all that stuff is made up in the Midwest because that's where they used to build cars. There's a lot of industry up there. So we ended up going up there because there's better tooling. And really, it was just a whole bunch of, hanging out with people, going to shops and talking to people, making some really awesome friendships, and just telling people what I want. It's like, I want to roll this like this. I want to cut this like this. I want to lathe the stainless parts for the yokes for the casters because nobody builds a caster that's quite good enough. I want to do this. This part's going to rust out, so we need to cut it like this. I don't want to do face trim. I want to do back trim because, I don't want to hide a sloppy cut kind of situation. And we really kind of developed some pretty awesome relationships with with two shops that are just able to put out such good stuff, better than we could ever pull off in Texas. So that's, I don't know. It's been a journey. That's for sure.
Do you have to make frequent visits up to them just to QC it, or you trust them implicitly?
We do video QC with our shop. So we still have our shop here in Austin, and we do custom stuff for restaurants or bigger cookers for friends or whatever. I have a food festival called Hot Luck, and we build cookers for that every year. So we have that. So there's stations set up at the two remote shops, and it's got like crazy lights. It's like a stage. It looks like some, like Rush, like Neil Peart would have been up there, playing drums, crazy lights and stuff. And we do a video QC. And then I also do go up to the two shops pretty frequently, scope out some stuff, grab lunch, be like, man, these, things are getting a little off. But we also filter a lot of these cookers through our shop for real life quality control too. So it's definitely a process.
When it comes to selling, there has never been a bigger time in business to try and decide which way is best. And so you have dealer network way of doing it, or dealer network method, or you have DTC, direct to consumer. You're currently like running both sides to a certain degree. So you're building a dealer network, and you also, as I say in the read, have the option, if there isn't a dealer near you, to go direct to franklinbbqpits.com, order one there, and then it's shipped right to your driveway.
Yeah, totally. So initially we started doing direct to consumer from our shop, and we were shipping those out. We still do ship those things out, or you can come to our shop and pick them up. That's if you're anywhere in Texas, you want to come pick it up. But instead of, it's a pretty expensive barbecue pit. Like, things just cost a lot of money, and it really stinks how expensive things are. But we didn't want to go through a third party distributor for this stuff because they're going to take their margin. That's going to make the cooker too expensive. So we kind of were thinking that it would be cooler and way more Franklin-y, definitely more me, to go build relationships with individual mom and pop shops, because Franklin Barbecue is a little mom and pop shop. So is Pitt's. Real small little situation going on. So we built our own dealer network all over the country, and we've been kind of going out there, and we have, the accessories. We're just kind of just gradually building it up. And if you think about it, like, Ace Hardware, like locally owned grill shops and stuff like that. So we've got quite a bit of stores now, but you can still order on the website. It's the same price either way. And I will say also, a cool thing about us is that our flat pricing includes shipping. So we've been able to go through different freight companies, and we all manage this stuff in house. It's all super DIY stuff. There's no company like, thank you for calling Time Life, may I take your order? You're talking to our office, you're talking to, Stacy, or anybody at the office. There are a handful of people up there. But we've been able to kind of manage all this freight stuff. So almost no matter where you live, that freight price is calculated into the price of the barbecue pit. So when you buy it at the store, it took freight to get there. When you buy it from our shop, there's freight. It's all in there. So there's no like hidden cost, which I think is pretty cool, which actually, I think, I don't really keep up with this stuff a heck of a lot, what other people are doing. But I think we are somewhere in the mid-range pricing for this style of cooker, because of the shipping situation.
Where would you like to see dealer growth in the next couple of years? You have a benchmark of dealers you'd like to have in the wings?
No, I don't really have a benchmark. I mean, I would like to see, really for us, it's more about the relationships, and it's more about just trusting the people that are selling the stuff. And we don't want to see these pits in a weird place, like, in a big box store. Like, what is that thing? I don't know. Like, I want people to be excited about them. And I want these cookers to be in stores that are owned by real people that are excited about barbecue, are excited about cooking, are going to use these cookers and actually be able to talk about them. And also, I mean, I go to dealers. If I'm traveling, I'll pop into a dealer, or if somebody's, I mean, this has happened a handful of times. If some, like little barbecue grill shop somewhere has been on the fence about it, I'll just go up there and be like, hey, is the owner here today? And I'll sit there and I'll chit chat with them, and I'll talk about the stuff. And I mean, it's just really, we really do go out of our way to keep it so grassroots, and so just kind of, I hate to keep saying like mom and pop, but like really just a local business, I mean, that's the kind of stuff I'm super into.
At some point, would you convert to a total dealer network? Like, once you expand across the country, will you always have the online option?
I think we'll always have the online option, but you never know. I mean, it's hard to say what's going to happen in the next few years.
What else you got going on? What's this uptown sports club thing you got working?
Oh, yeah. So I opened up a new restaurant about 6 months ago.
Can you do that?
Because I don't have anything going on.
Like, your Franklin Barbecue, to me, as the outsider looking in, like, you are the heart and soul of what Texas barbecue has become. You wouldn't even be allowed to do anything else than maintain the barbecue shop.
Well, we'll see. Yeah, and that's why the new restaurant is just a couple blocks up the road, so I can just kind of bounce between the two all the time. Yeah, but it's called Uptown Sports Club. It's on East 6th here in Austin, Texas, and kind of an all-day place. Stiff drinks at night, espressos, coffee stuff in the morning. We've got breakfast. We've got po' boys, gumbo, raw bar, steaks, grilled fish, all the stuff. And we're open till late. So it's a really fun spot. It's really meant to be kind of just the place that you always want to hang out. Like, anytime I go to a town, it's like, okay, where do I go get oysters? Where do I get a steak and a Negroni? And that's Uptown Sports Club.
Your menu?
What's up?
Your menu?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've been working on it for about 6 years. So it took us a long time to build barbecue pits, but it also took me a long time to make another restaurant. It's also in a building from the 1800s that we did a full like historical renovation on.
Do you get enough credit for being a cook outside of barbecue?
I don't know. I'm not calculating credits. I just kind of do
Not?
do things that make me, get me excited about things. And, like, I love being creative. And the thing about Franklin Barbecue is, we've been doing this for almost 15 years and we're still making it better. We're still making little tweaks, but I've got such an awesome team over there that, it's really exciting for me to make barbecue pits or make a book here and there, or come home and build some cabinets, or sit in this room that I'm sitting in, that I've been working on for a while with, 75-year-old shiplap, that I'm still working on. So I kind of like, I like projects, I guess. And Uptown has been a super fun project. So I'm not calculating credits, I guess.
Are you still
I really
shocked?
don't care about
Are you still
stuff.
shocked that there's a line? 4-hour,
Oh my God.
5-hour line?
I've been shocked since the beginning.
Yeah, but now it's outrageous. This is a long time for
it's
a line,
actually,
right?
No, it's we've had a line the whole time.
Yeah.
And it's really, really freaking amazing. And I just feel like we're the luckiest people in the world to be able to pull that off. And it was kind of an accident, sort of. But
it can't be an accident. Like, the food has to be that good to have people lining up for the better part of a half a day.
Yeah. I think the food is absolutely that good. I had some about 6 hours ago. I was like, wow, this stuff is so good. Oh my gosh, how do we do it, guys? The lines are still there. It's not as long and terrible as people think it is. It's really pretty fast.
Give me an idea. Like, what am I looking at for an investment on let's say a Wednesday or a Thursday? I'm not coming on a weekend. I'm not an idiot. Let's go midweek.
Yeah, Saturdays are kind of bonkers. Well, so it really kind of depends on when you show up. If you show up at 6 a.m, you're going to wait a while because we don't open till 11. So people are like, I waited in line for 5 hours. Like, well, you showed up 5 hours before we opened.
Yeah.
So I can't really help you much there. And that's really sweet because, it's only going to get longer. But if you were to show up, say, at noon on a Wednesday, you might wait an hour. Hour and a half. We're down, I think, like per guest, per order on the front counter, we're probably down to about 36 seconds a person. I time this stuff. And we're like, hey, well, but also that person that's cutting, if we're out of seats, they might slow down a little bit. If we just did a turn and we've got a lot of seats, they can speed up. So we have to, that's the throttle for the whole thing, is that cutting board. So I think if you popped in at like noonish on any normal day, you'd probably wait no more than an hour and a half. But you'll meet some awesome people. You'll probably have a beer. You'll definitely get full. You'll definitely get barbecue, and you'll get to hang out. And I feel like you'd probably have a good time.
Well, if I ever get to Austin, certainly it's a place I would like to go. However, I'm putting it out there that I'm going around the back. I'm not waiting. Number one. Number two, if you're interested in getting one of the premier offset pits that are available in the market right now, you go to franklinbbqpits.com. You either find a dealer near you. We just installed one about an hour south of me out there in the metropolis of Hartville, Ohio, called Hartville Hardware.
Heck yeah.
Which is worth the visit, Aaron. If you've never seen the world's largest independent hardware store, I say this all the time and people don't understand what I'm actually saying. There's a house, a full-blown house inside the hardware store. That's how big we're talking here. You can find a dealer near you, or if you're interested in buying, you can see all about it on the website. You can purchase there right on the website. Aaron, I've always appreciated the time you've given to the show. You've gone over and above with time explaining into the weeds of this cooker, which I certainly appreciated. And that's the goal here for this particular segment. And, the support and friendship you've given to the show for many years now, I certainly appreciate it, and I look forward to the next time.
Heck yeah, man. Great show and always good to talk. So, yeah, give me a holler whenever you come to Austin.
All right.
Or I'll see you in Ohio.
All right. Let's look for that. We'll see who gets there. We'll see who gets where first. And that's Aaron Franklin from Franklin Barbecue Pits, and, of course, the barbecue restaurant, and the Uptown Sports Club, which is just about 6 months old at this point. So if you're looking for a new go-to spot, which is blocks away from Franklin Barbecue, then the Uptown is the place to go. So we thank Aaron Franklin for that. All right, let's get ready to go. But before we do, the newest sponsor of the show, Aladino, a family tobacco, cigars, right? Look, I understand as a consumer, as somebody who has allowable advertising on my show, that, you can't just regularly go out and market tobacco products. That's looked down on. However, Aladino has found an avenue and a friend here in the Barbecue Central show. Huge fan of their cigars, especially the Aladino brand, and then the Corojo Reserva line. It's a family-run brand, vertically integrated manufacturer known for its authentic Corojo tobacco grown at JRE Farms in Honduras. This, the original Cuban seed of Corojo, its flavor characteristics unique, and it's bringing you back to the golden era of cigars from Cuba, 1947 to 1961, if you remember those cigars. Their approach in blending prioritizes flavor to give you contemporary smokers a sensational experience with a range of blends, making sure there's something for everybody to enjoy. You find a retailer near you by visiting jretobacco.com. If you're interested in trying the Aladino Corojo Reserva in Robusto size, email me, greg@thebbqcentralshow.com. I'm happy to ship a couple off to you just to try it. Corojo tobacco, Ming, it's unbelievable. When people ask me, what is this Aladino really like? I said, oh, look, you ever had a real Cuban cigar? A lot of fakes out there, especially here in the States. If you've happened upon a real Cuban, I say the Corojo Reserva gives you the closest Cuban experience, but you get even more flavor. If Cubans vary mine. Here, you're getting what I would call medium full to full flavor on the Corojo Reserva, but the strength isn't kicking your face off. So, in every way, better than a Cuban cigar. And from the original Cuban seed of Corojo. Come on. Again, jretobacco.com to find a retailer near you. And if you want to try one or two, hit up your pal Greg. Greg@thebbqcentralshow.com, and just put Aladino cigars in the subject line, and then don't forget to give me a shipping address, and I'll send a couple out. I got a box. I'm happy to share. Happy to spread the Aladino love, baby. Yeah. Follow them on social media as well. All right, we're back to wrap the show right after this. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Let's get back to a guy who has more experience giving you his opinion than he actually has cooking. Once again, here's your host, Greg Rempe.
And we thank Aaron Franklin for joining us on the show for the last two segments. FranklinBBQPits.com, the website. The new restaurant, the Uptown Sports Club, blocks away from Franklin Barbecue, still in Austin. I don't know if you noticed. He laughed when I said, I'm coming around back. I'm not waiting in line. Guess what? I'm not waiting. Kidding. Do you know who I am? I'm not waiting in line. No, I will not do it. Maybe I would do it. But I'm definitely not showing up at 6 in the morning. No, sir. I will try my hand. Look, what did I tell you the last time I was at Truth Barbecue in Houston? Showed up Wednesday at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock. We knew right off the bat we'd probably be out of some proteins. But you're going to Texas. I want to try brisket. I want to try the turkey and some sausage. If there's no ribs or if you're out of some of the sausage, all right. But I want the mainstays. That's going to be turkey and brisket. So I'll take the risk without waiting in the line because I know the quality is definitely going to be there. So that's my secret at Truth. Although I have waited in line at Truth hour and a half the first times we were there, and it was worth it. But to me, it was pushing the line of decency for me. Maybe not for you. But there's no way in hell you're finding me at 5 o'clock in the morning standing in line for 4 hours to then possibly stand in line after it opens. I mean, that ain't me. But if that's you, God bless you. We thank Aaron Franklin. That's what I'm saying. All right, let's go ahead and wrap it up all the way back in the first hour's Meathead talking about aging. We also talked about if griddling was really barbecue or grilling. He does not seem to recall making that statement on X, but I'll pull it down and show him. Then we had a spirited chat with Robert Moss, robertfmoss.com. And the second hour, all Aaron Franklin all the time, going in depth on that new offset cooker that he's got out. Find one near you through dealer networking, franklinbbqpits.com, or buy one directly from Franklin Barbecue Pits website, franklinbbqpits.com, and it'll ship right to your driveway. $51.50 is the price there. $51.50 includes shipping. Big show planned for you next week. It's the third Tuesday, so West Wright will be around. We'll have a quarterly guest. I believe that's Jess Pryles up to bat. Number of other guests as well. And don't forget, the fourth Tuesday of this month, we're going to be voting for the 2023 Barbecue Central Show's Guest Hall of Fame. Looking forward to that. My picks are great. I'm calling it now. My picks are great. Until next Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, this is your program host and proud U.S. American, Greg Rempe. Bye-bye.
This is Dion Blumenrader with Big Hoss One Sauce, and you're listening to the best show on all things barbecue with my man, Greg Rempe.